Okay, we'll call to order this regular meeting of the council. We need a roll call, please.
Mayor Brinkman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallman?
Here.
Councilmember Beckman?
Here.
Councilmember Cernanik?
Present.
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Councilmember Taylor?
Present.
Councilmember Valdez?
Here. I was going to say Valdez.
Go ahead.
I move that pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute Section 24-6-402 sub 4 sub B, for the purposes of, let me say this again. I move that we go into an executive session. How about that? Pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402 sub 4 sub B, for the purposes of receiving legal advice regarding contract issues, and pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute Section 24-6-402 sub 4 sub F, to discuss personnel issues with the city manager regarding his contract. And joining council in the meeting will be Andrew Nathan, who is our
Council, too.
Yeah, legal counsel, external legal counsel Andy Nathan for the attorney-client piece and personnel section, and then Michael Penny only for the personnel content.
Okay, we need a second.
Second.
I request that be split into two motions.
I would like to discuss this first one first.
Okay.
Okay.
Jerry.
In my opinion, the city manager is doing an excellent job, earns absolutely every cent that he is paid, and then some. So thank you very much. However, I think our discussion is not about a personnel issue. I do think that the discussion is about a contract clause. The city, or does the city manager have a personal interest in the contract clause and possible negotiation? Of course, the answer is yes on that. However, that does not meet the statutory requirement for convening an executive session. We are requesting legal advice for a specific legal question. The legal advice will not reveal confidential matters or compromise a negotiating strategy if discussed in an open meeting. This discussion is on a policy and law regarding a contract clause with the current city manager and future city managers. Because this is a question about a contract and not a personnel issue, the statutory requirement is just for convening an executive session is not being met. Therefore, our discussion should take place in an open meeting.
Bruce?
I understand a need to meet with the attorney over some issues that are specific legal advice, so I don't have any question about that. As I understand Peggy's motion, she would like to separate the legal advice from the part that Jerry just discussed, which would be the personnel contract issue. Is that what I'm understanding?
I don't know. I'm willing to hear it, though.
Well, I was wanting to have those split into two separate motions. I wasn't expecting what you all just said. I just saw them as two separate motions, as two separate issues to be voted on separately.
Well, we have a motion and a second, and if you want to make an amendment to that, you can.
Okay, I thought our rules allowed us to split items that have two separate purposes and to vote on them separately.
After a motion and a second?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I may be wrong. I've got the rules here, but I didn't put my finger on that yet.
Okay, so Kristen, is that?
I think she's bringing a motion on the table to split the motion into two separate.
Do we need to make another motion?
I think Councilmember Cole did make that motion, or did you just make a request?
I just made the request to split.
I would make a motion.
Okay, I'll make a formal motion to that effect.
Even though we do have a motion and a second on the floor?
Right, because it's addressing the motion that's on the floor.
Okay.
It's like amending the motion.
Okay. Go ahead. Do you want to make your motion?
Yes, so I move that we split the motion into the two separate parts, one for legal advice and one for meeting with the city attorney.
Is there a second?
City manager.
We need a second for discussion.
Restate it again, I'm sorry.
She wants to split the motion so that we vote on one for legal advice and we vote separately to go into exec for a personnel issue.
Second?
Do we have a second? Okay. Lack of a second, it dies. So original motion is to go into exec session based on the pursuant tos that Bruce read.
So can we have just additional discussion on that then?
Yes.
So the way I would view this, and I'm constantly learning about this, it would seem to me that if during the executive session, should I reach a point where I believe that the discussion no longer is specific to what would be appropriate in an executive session, I could move at that point to change the nature of the executive session.
Yes. And part of the legal that we read into the record in an exec session is that if any participant believes that the discussion is going outside the proper scope, interrupt the discussion and make an objection, and we'll deal with it at that time. Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second to go into exec. Ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor with Councilmember Valdez voting no. The motion carries.
Okay, we will return at 7. Okay, Council, any changes to the agenda? This evening's agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved as is. Minutes from the study session of February 5th. Any changes?
I do have a question.
Peggy?
When we have emails and letters on public hearings, how are we making them part of the record? So maybe
Wendy?
I'll make a statement. I think they need to be part of the official record. We got packets with comments from citizens for public hearing. We have, electronic packets, so can they not be attached to the minutes?
Wendy?
Any written comment provided to the City Council after packets are sent out, including written comments received the night of the council meeting, are placed with the official record and scanned into our Laserfiche, which is our electronic filing system. And then they become part of and I sent a email out to all the other clerks across the state, and that's what they all do.
So
They
can we...
with their official record.
Okay, so can we have in the minutes a statement that comments were received that way,
Certainly.
so that people do know that they exist? Thank you.
Jim?
Yes, I'd like to offer an amendment to the minutes for the 5th. It's on line 87. It was under comments that I was making about Senate Bill 25. And in line 87, after the word City of Littleton, I'd like to strike the rest of that sentence and instead substitute the following, which according to my notes is what I actually said. After City of Littleton, citizens' right to choose for themselves, period. it puts in jeopardy our agreement with our firefighters.
Any other changes? Okay. Then those minutes are approved as amended. The minutes from the regular meeting of February 19th. Any changes? Seeing none, those are approved as is. Okay, we'll start with reports from council members. Bruce.
I want to compliment the city for doing so well with dealing with a small, minor crisis emergency that occurred in the last few days. We have a 35-year-old boiler system in which one of the major pipes and major connections began to leak, and actually the seal went out. And Dave Stacy, the person who's in charge of our buildings, was notified over the weekend when he received a phone call from the dispatch that one of the police officers was trying to find a key to find out why the water was running out of the area where the boiler room is. And Dave responded down, and that started the whole thing going. And it resulted in part of the building just being not occupiable because of the water that was flowing in here of some significance. And City Manager Penny made the decision that they really couldn't come to work that day and do things as normal because of just the threat of the water throughout the building area. And eventually the problem was solved. But it required that the dispatch center relocate. And whether it was a minor emergency or a major crisis, for the relocation of the communications center, that is truly a major undertaking and one that they practice for regularly. It also required some of the other departments, when you have business scheduled as usual and an expectation to be able to do it, some of it just has to go on even though the workspace isn't available. And eventually by that afternoon the problem was resolved. But I think it's just a testimony to the people who work here that they plan for these kinds of things. They have a system, they have an alternative. Dispatch was able to go on without I imagine the public was totally unaware that the 911 system had to relocate to a totally different location. So again, thanks to the city employees, thanks to the department heads, thanks to the folks like Dave Stacy that got up in the middle of the night and came down and started to assess the problem.
Thank you, Phil.
Yes, with the South Metro Denver Chamber and its Legislative Action Committee, been pretty active during the legislative session, but we've been receiving briefings on a number of issues. One that I've shared some background material on is the bill that Senator Mike Johnston is championing with regard to education funding, and it's received probably a little more press over the last week, at least on the radio. It has been receiving that as he's now looking to formally introduce that bill this week. Yesterday we spent about 2 hours with Senator Johnston and understand it's a challenge because it's the first time, I think, since '81 that the state is dealing with a bill that actually focuses on education funding, not all of the elements that have occurred around that. So also of interest to, I know, at least a number of citizens and folks that have participated in some level of governmental service is Senator Johnston is also proposing a modification on para, so that is coming to help bring some stability to that system as well as sustainability to that. And we also had a chance to listen to Senator Balmer with regard the long days and nights they're spending at the Capitol, both yesterday and then it'll be again at least this Friday on dealing with guns. So a lot of items of interest that also have some economic undertones. And then the Economic Development Group this week is getting to hear from the new chancellor of CU and the Anschutz campus, as well as the folks that are doing a lot of construction in that area, and that's going to be on the agenda this Friday morning. And then secondly, wanted to report on the Dr. Cog workshop, board workshop that occurred on February 22nd and 23rd. The agenda included both a review of the past year, as well as a review of the mission of DRCOG, and it's kind of an interesting group because it's 56 jurisdictions, and there's a 25% turnover in the group every 2 years. So it's as a group that has to be reminded very often of that, and lots of causes for some of that. But the breakout sessions were particularly focused on what are the challenges in local communities, and then how do those bubble up to potential regional themes. And so there, as you might imagine, were quite a wide variety from, of course, transit that was there, but dealing with housing, infrastructure, water, aging, just dealing with planning and code issues and keeping those current with regard to some of the changes in demographic. And one of the themes is that more and more jurisdictions are not necessarily in full build-out, but being challenged more with brownfield versus greenfield development. And so it was seen as a common theme across the region. And then the last breakout session was dealing with DRCOG and its own mechanics in dealing with both transportation funding as well as others. The fallout for that is going to be a review of the TIP process, which is the Transportation Improvement Projects, and also taking a look at the various roles of the subcommittees, particularly the Metro Vision Issues Committee, that exists with the board. And so those were there. Anyone that's interested in a lot more detail, but it was a day and a half of some time where we had a chance to get to know folks around the region and realize that we have a lot of common issues. Thank you.
Jerry.
I want to express my thanks to Wendy, our city clerk, for providing information to us on a regular basis. I think that I've been on city council now for just over a year, and I think the job of city clerk is something that I never realized the job that it is. So I really do appreciate what you do. And also I'd like to thank our deputy city attorney for providing the information that I'd asked for last meeting. I do appreciate you doing a little research and coming up with that information. My last item is North Littleton Promise continues to serve the citizens of Northeast Littleton and the kids over there. And in fact, the program now has kids who grew up in that system are now coming back and helping to teach kids to read, help them to read and do homework and teach soccer. So everybody check out the North Littleton Promise, and the director over there, Maureen Shannon, would love to talk with you. So that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce.
Good session, good discussion, I think, last night. Joint meeting with the Englewood City Council on the ESCI fire study, if you will, the work that had been done to look at some level of interaction from light to strong between the Englewood Fire Department and Littleton Fire Rescue, including our fire partners with the Fire Protection District and Highlands Ranch Metro District. So good conversation. We'll see if there's some more steps that come out of that. Prior to that meeting yesterday morning, on the 4th, City Manager Penny, Chief Mullen, and I met with a fellow named Gene Eby, who's the Littleton Fire Rescue Medical Director as an employee of Littleton Hospital. So essentially, he's subject matter expert when it comes to trauma and EMT process and EMS process and planning. What he was updating us on was essentially what's referred to as a paramedic community health program. And this has been done elsewhere in a number of communities. In particular, there's a good example in Fort Worth where paramedics they're looking at we're looking at the data, and it's predicated on what they did down there in some other communities, to basically see if there's a way to reduce EMS cost by pre-managing cases, in particular things like low reimbursement or Medicaid related, or situationally where there's what's euphemistically referred to in the business as frequent flyers. If you've got an individual who's consistently having alcohol problems, or if you have mental health or nursing home patients, where there's things that can be done and care can be managed to avoid the cost of EMS services, EMS transport, hospital readmission, which is apparently, and I don't know all the specifics, but a significant decrement as far as the hospitals are concerned under the Affordable Care Act. So it's in process. The fire department, Littleton Fire Rescue, is looking at it. There's grant money. There's a high probability that hospitals would be willing to do something to contribute to fund these types of initiatives because they are valuable in a true partnering kind of arrangement. And so essentially this is something to keep an eye on. I'm sure we'll hear more about it, but I wanted to mention it to council as something that I thought was quite interesting and was on the docket.
And I'm sorry,
please.
Just for the full council, and we're going to have a study session on that same issue and have Gene come and update you with some others. So apologize, council member, but so you guys will see it probably late April.
Yeah, this was just introducing the concept, and I thought it was very interesting, very intriguing. Two other quick items. A lot of people, I assume most everybody knows, a lot of people may not, some people may not know, but Ray Koenig, of course, passed away, and his memorial service was on Sunday at Hudson Gardens, and it was very well attended and very well done. And our condolences, of course, to the family and friends. And then several citizens pinged me with a request to publicize what's, I think, referred to as the World Wildlife Federation Earth Hour, which is 8:30 p.m. on Saturday, the 23rd of March. And people are being requested to turn off all non-essential lights and promote citizens or invite citizens and businesses to join in to raise awareness of environmental challenges we all face while planning for extreme weather events. So things like Hurricane Sandy and some of these substantial events on the coast obviously don't affect us, but is evidenced by the relatively large snowstorm we had last week. There are weather events that hit all parts of the country, and this is a way to raise awareness of those issues. So 8:30 on Saturday, the 23rd, and you can certainly Google that and get more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim.
Thank you. The Colorado Municipal League had their legislative session a couple of weeks ago where we talked about legislation all day long and had leaders of the House and Senate come in to speak to us at noon. The following day was followed by the Policy Committee, which is a broad-based representation across the state of about 100 members who comes to Denver, and we again talked about legislation and actually took positions on the legislation before the House and the Senate right now. And that was followed up by the Executive Board meeting, who confirmed what the Policy Committee had done and then reviewed the things that was happening at the legislative session. On Dr. Cog, I'm a member of the advisory committee for a group that's called Adult Resources for Care and Help. And that is a group that is looking at the various types of human resource providers in the country, or in the state, or excuse me, in the metro area, and the types of programs that they provide, and trying to prevent duplication of these services so that we can spread the wealth a little bit better. They also have a program that's coordinating refugee programs in the metro area, and another program that is doing after hospital care, trying to prevent particularly the elderly from leaving the hospital, not understanding what the doctor said in a very fast tone about when their medications are due and how often they got to take it. And so it's providing help with those particularly elderly with their home care to keep them from going back into the hospital after a few days because they couldn't understand what they were supposed to be doing. So that's it.
Peggy.
I have several things, big things, Michael. First, when we have an exec session at the beginning of a regular, well, any meeting, I think it would be really helpful to the citizens if we could estimate the amount of time, if nothing else, just allow an hour for it, so that citizens would know when to show up or turn on their TV or whatever. But they all seem to last at least an hour. So you and I had talked about that, but I think we can do that.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Then second, last Wednesday, I had
I just want, so for council, we normally try to do executive sessions at the end of the evening because of the unknown timing, but when you've got guests coming in, it's like we do for other guests, rather than having them sit for the duration of the meeting, if we can fit them in.
You
we
mean
do
an
it at
exec
6 o'clock.
session guest. We got all
Exec
these
session,
guests,
yes,
right?
yes. Thank you for the clarification. So,
Thank
but we do try to do them at the end for that purpose.
Yeah, thank you. Last Wednesday, I had the pleasure to attend the Rocky Mountain West Annual Leadership Symposium. I think there were 4 people affiliated with the city manager, director of community development, someone from the planning commission, and myself. I think we were the 4. I wish the whole council had been able to attend, and I hope will next year. It was really stimulating. But the high point I wanted to mention, high point for me, was a presentation by Peter, and I'm not sure I'll say his name right, Kajiyama, who wrote this book, which you can't see, For the Love of Cities. It's subtitled The Love Affair Between People and Their Places. Not just cities in general, but particular place. As in, I think we have a lot of that in Littleton. But he emphasized how when people are emotionally involved with the place that they live, they love it. Well, I guess some people can be unhappy emotionally, but when they love the place they live, they do things in it. They attract other people to it. And so if anybody wants to borrow my copy of the book, you're welcome to, but there are also videos online that he has done. And it's just incredible, some of the ideas that he shared that have actually been done to help promote more engagement by the people with the city that they love. Third, question about museum fees. Some of us seem to not be in agreement on how we're moving forward with that. I thought the museum director was going to bring a
It's
proposal.
scheduled for a study session April 23rd.
I already had asked him about it, so now we know. So any of you who are in the audience or watching from home, April 23rd on our study session, so you can see the proposal.
Tentatively, yes.
Tentative, right. Something
published
else may
agenda.
bump it, but that's when it's coming up. Fourth, man, we're going to get through these fast. As Bruce said, last night we had the joint session with the Englewood Council with the ESCI study, and there were several things presented in initiatives, strategies that might be undertaken, and could be undertaken without too much shaking up of anything, but just getting more collaboration and efficiency with things. But one of the things I thought of after I left last night is already Littleton has relationships with Highlands Ranch Metro District and the Littleton Fire Protection District, and it seemed to me that we might consider moving in a direction where actually we could have a similar arrangement with Englewood. We already are quite skilled, I think, in working that way, and we could achieve and make a lot of collaborative progress if we did that, at least for a few years, trying to improve efficiencies and work out more collaboration. So, Michael, I'm requesting we might talk about that at a study session, too. I think Michael didn't hear that. Did Michael hear that? Okay. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Michael, do you have any report?
I may, but I'm not thinking that way, so no. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we will move to citizen appearances. We have no guest citizens and no public or no scheduled presentations. So if there are any unscheduled public appearances, you're welcome to come down at this point. It is an opportunity for any citizen to express their opinion or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected, and typically these issues are referred to the staff for follow-up information or research, and we report it back to council and the individual that initiated the comment or the inquiry. We do have 2 issues for on public hearing this evening. One is the second reading of the Littleton Commons rezone, and the other is the second reading on an ordinance regarding a marijuana moratorium. So if you want to speak to either one of those, I would ask that you please wait for that agenda item to come up. Is there anyone who would like to address council at this point? Jose? And when you come down, please give us your name and address, and you have 4 minutes.
Good evening, Council. My name is Jose Trujillo, 5574 South Huron Street, District 2. This evening, I come before you with a small little item from the Littleton Independent, 1976. And I know that a lot of you know Vaughn Gardenier. He's passed away, but Vaughn is a good friend of mine. But the year I was working on to demolish a house on Alamo Street, Vaughn was very against that, and so were a lot of people. But I would just like to read you this little ditty here. He said, "To put a hole in the middle of an area would be wrong if it wasn't an historical site. If necessary, money were donated to the city, the council could consider buying the house and possibly leasing it back to the donor for a nominal fee." Now, this wouldn't have worked because I'd still be out of my parking. That would, of course, leave Joe Trujillo with a parking problem. Some citizens claimed his customers wouldn't walk the 2 blocks from West Alamo Avenue to the restaurant, but Mr. Trujillo said he would make his employees, 22 at one time, use the parking lot and thus free spaces for his customers. Now here's the old kicker right here. City planner Bill Franklin told the Sentinel, Trujillo does indeed have a parking problem, but he said Trujillo's proposed solution does not conform with the city's plans to eventually build a few large parking lots in downtown Littleton. Franklin, in charge of a study of the Littleton parking situation, there is a deficit of 400 spaces, a figure based on national standards recommending a certain number of parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of business space. Franklin said he would take this recommendation to the council in 2 months. Well, it's been a while. And about 10 studies, very costly studies. It is still my feeling that the developers who have built in downtown Littleton have never intended on providing parking for their facilities. My personal feeling, I feel the city has been negligent in not following up on the developer and making them do this. You know, we do have a historical preservation that gives away 50% of your parking, but what we're looking here is at the other 50%. It just kind of disappeared. Now, what are you going to do? Just want to tell you, I'm still on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Ben Burkett. I live at 5730 South Bemis Street. Last time I was here, it was for a very long night. It was the Nevada night. And one of the things I discussed with you all was a vision for Littleton and a brand for Littleton and our image. I want that discussion to continue. That we have a big brand here. We have image. I talk to friends and coworkers, and they live all across the Denver metro area. And they love Littleton. They love coming down here. I want to change that discussion a little bit tonight on something that I realized about that Nevada discussion that we had. What I realized was there's a lot of talk about the TOD as becoming the rationale and the reasoning for doing development in our vicinity down here in our downtown area. I will say that's why I moved to this area, is because of the light rail and all that. I started thinking about it and going, okay, if this is the rationale, where's the guidelines? Where are the plans? What's to help us determine and guide what we're going to allow or not allow in our development? Right now, it feels very piecemeal, very ad hoc. I'm in the business world. I'm a CPA. I have principles I have to follow. I do not like to do things piecemeal. I do not like to do things ad hoc. Now, artists might say that's a creative flaw that I have, but it's still a reasonable expectation. I know, like I myself would like to invest more in my own home. I'm a little wary, as I'm sure others are. And it's partly because I'm not sure or clear what the guidelines are for our area. I know there's some studies have been done, but it's a comprehensive study, like a station area plan that comes along with TOD development. That's lacking. I don't see that. And if anything, what I would say is that would make your job easier. You would have hopefully less long nights like Nevada, because you have guidelines there that have been established, that have received input from business, citizens, the developers. If it's done right, you can have a lot of those answers, and you can have documentation and guidelines to back you up, as well as I have my own say. So I really urge let's start talking about having a station area plan. Let's start developing it. Let's have those guidelines. So that's all I wanted to share with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you mind, there are cards in the back, would you mind filling one out and getting us your name, address, and phone number, handing that to the clerk, and an email address, and we'll get back to you on your
absolutely.
comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brinkman and members of council. My name is Gary Johnson. I live at 5753 South Prescott Street. Professionally, I'm a professional licensed engineer, state of Colorado, and I'm a certified expert witness in transportation and traffic engineering matters. As a public service matter, I'm a past member of the City of Columbine Valley Planning Commission. The purpose of my presentation is to put a little bit of meat on what Ben has just presented, and to point out what I perceive as a void in the city planning process, and also then to suggest a solution. I believe that a plan is needed, similar to what Ben has just presented, and here's why. When I bought my property on Prescott, there was a part of the city zoning code that was labeled or referred to a transit impact zone, which provided for a much more detailed review of specific development proposals within that area. I felt this was adequate insurance that rational development principles would be applied where necessary. As I understand it, that has been removed from the planning process. Further, I've read the Littleton Boulevard corridor study, where several planning concepts were put forward and adopted. Again, I felt that document was, provided adequate level of proof that an adequate process was undertaken and that rational planning principles were applied. Now, the 2005 study, now I wonder how much that study is considered valid by the city, given its age, its limited scope, and the changed conditions. I reviewed the downtown neighborhood plan prepared in 2011 and found that it did in fact mention the light rail station, but as an amenity rather than a centerpiece for development. And it did not include any area east of the railroad. It was completely void of any transit-oriented development principles. In a sampling of the 10 other major cities that are impacted by the metropolitan light rail system, I find that over half of the existing and planned station areas have been thoroughly studied. Most of those reside or are in highly populated urban centers, similar to downtown Littleton. And those plans were based on a thorough community input involvement process that clearly articulated the goals, the strategies, and guidelines of rational development around those stations. Now, from what I know of Littleton, is a city that has taken great pains to be inclusive, to listen to all input and to develop comprehensive plans and community strategies that benefit all. What I do not understand, however, is why, given the enormous investment that includes the railroad grade separation of a number of years ago, and the actual construction of the light rail system through Littleton, and also knowing that there's an enormous opportunity that for all the open space that surrounds that station, that you haven't taken to a full study and organize, prioritize, and encourage a rational development plan around transit-oriented development principles. I therefore request that the city immediately commence a station area study that considers all of these opportunities, that involves the input and buy-in of all the existing residents and merchants and users within the station area. And I'd like that, please, done before any further decisions are made regarding development within the original transit impact zone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I have a request. Since you have all that written out, probably more than you had a chance to read, is there any possibility you could email that to us?
I certainly could. I'd
Thank
be more
you.
than happy to.
At least for me. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I'll let the city clerk and we'll distribute it.
Anyone else? Frank?
Good evening, City Council. I'm Frank Atwood. I live at 7094 South Castilla Street. I'm here to ask that all public-private partnership discussions be postponed until after the community has an opportunity to review the outstanding work of the Riverfront Authority. I hope that City Council postpones any public-private partnership discussions until after they have a Riverfront Authority report and summary in hand. I hear and I'm pleased that Councilmember Taylor, a member of the Authority since 1981, congratulations, sir.
Thank you. My longevity shows.
Says he will be writing a report on Riverfront Authority. I hope he enlists the support of others. I would suggest perhaps former Mayor Doug Clark and Tom Christopike and Terry Graham. Councilmember Taylor might do well to include discussions of our sister cities, Inglewood's efforts with regards to Trolley Center and Cinderella City. I look forward to reading the report prior to any public-private partnership discussions. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
And thank you for your services.
Thank you. Anyone else? Pam?
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Pam Chadbourne, and I live at the corner of Crestline and Nevada in downtown Littleton. I'm going to echo and give a different take on something you've already heard from two other speakers. In the first few months of this year, Littleton must consider applications to add almost 2,000 apartments in only 5 sites to the city. Littleton is not alone in attracting the attention of developers in the Denver area. This is a lot for our city, but there's a lot going on in the rest of the Denver metro area. I heard a report on the radio that there are now approximately 4,500 apartments in various stages of development within a 1.5 miles of downtown Denver. And this is the February issue of Life on Capitol Hill. This headline is Developers Awakening from the Slump. This report describes 1,235 units that are in near-term development around Capitol Hill. And that doesn't include additional projects that haven't defined their counts yet or that are less defined. So, and there's also a lot of other development in that very hot Highlands area north of downtown, as well as development in a lot of other suburban locations. So Littleton's not alone in attracting development attention. Because of the Denver development market, and also because of the high number and high density of the proposed apartments in Littleton, I'm concerned that Littleton is about to allow overbuilding of apartments in our city. I believe the demand for apartments in Littleton will not be maintained in the near and long term. I believe that developers can get funding now for this type of building, but that funding doesn't consider, and it doesn't have to, consider the future use of the properties or the potential failure to fill the developments in the future. So I think that this is a transient bulge caused by Gen X and Gen Y folks trying to save their down payments. There was a housing bubble which made it impossible early on, and then there was a financial or housing collapse over the past 5 years. So there's a pent-up demand, but I think that's transient. I think the demand for apartments will wane as the housing market recovers, and overbuilding will cause problems for the city of Littleton. It's not going to cause problems for the developers. It's going to cause problems for us down the road. So the obligation of defining the risk of overbuilding lies on Littleton city government. The burden of assessing the risk to the city does not lie on the applicants, and it doesn't lie on citizens like me. So I'm going to point at the city planning process as I have before and as others have. The current process does not seem to include a growth plan, specifically any definition of housing targets over the next 50 years or so. So to begin to address the risk of overbuilding in Littleton, I request that the City Council and staff should perform or acquire a market analysis of the greater Denver housing market. The analysis will be used in the comprehensive plan to define reasonable housing targets over time for the city and to define risk for building above or below those targets. It would include the greater Denver housing market and Littleton's place in the market. It customarily includes a median growth plan and then a high and low scenario. It's commonly estimated for intervals like every 10 years for 50 years. And it would allow definition of housing targets by type, by housing type, by number, by neighborhood over time.
Pam, you have about 30 seconds.
That's good. Okay. This type of housing plan would allow city stakeholders to make risk assessments of possible overbuilding of apartments in Littleton. In sum, I don't think the city has met its obligation to provide a risk assessment of upcoming development applications. Without a risk assessment, the city may find it has to deal with high vacancy or high crime housing in the future. At the proposed densities and quantities, Littleton would have a major challenge to deal with any one of these developments if they should fail. I request that the city not approve any more high-density apartment projects until a housing market study, including a risk assessment, has been performed and shared with the city staff, boards, council, and public. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Brezek. I live in the 4th District. I'm here to talk about the open meetings law once again. On November 6th, the council meeting convened into an executive session at approximately 8 p.m. to discuss personnel issues regarding our city manager, Michael Penny. At 10:09, the council reconvened to their regular meeting, and in the 4 remaining minutes of the meeting, a motion was made to increase the city manager's salary by $5,000 a year. A vote was taken, a 7-0 vote, and the meeting adjourned. All of that occurred in 4 minutes. That tells me that there was no discussion about the increase to our city manager's contract. And a board of 7 people, you cannot tell me that there's no need for discussion. I don't think all 7 of you came in here and didn't take the opportunity to at least praise the city manager and suggest that he deserved the increase. And by the fact that there's nothing reflected in the minutes and it all happened in 4 minutes tells me that the discussion took place in the executive session that you had that evening. The open meeting law states that you as a local public body are not allowed to adopt, and this is a quote from the law, you are not allowed to adopt any specific policy, position, resolution, rule, regulation, or formal action in an executive session. The courts have held that the mere rubber stamping of a decision made in an executive session invalidates the action. So I see two violations of the open meetings law. First, you made the decision in the executive session, and then you came out and you rubber stamped your decision in the meeting. Move forward to December 4th. A motion on your consent agenda was for the approval of an amendment to the city manager's contract. The minutes refer to it as severance pay. When asked about when the decision was made, in an email, Mayor Brinkman said it was, quote, decided on November 6th to consider an amendment. If I go to the minutes of December 4th, there's no discussion of any kind of an amendment to the city manager's contract. It wasn't on the agenda. It's not in the minutes. It's there as a motion for a mere rubber stamping of a decision that was made illegally in an executive session. At your last regular meeting, you held an executive session, and tonight you made a motion to go into an executive session that was challenged by the three of you. I do appreciate it. At least it tells me that maybe you're thinking about what the open meetings law has to say about your responsibilities and the oath that you swore to uphold when you were elected. The Open Records Act does not include applications, any amount paid or a benefit provided, incident to termination of employment, performance ratings, in their definition of a confidential personal file. Therefore, the discussion of any amount paid to our city manager has to take place in an open meeting. It's a public document. Public documents are excluded by law from being discussed in an executive session. Under Colorado Open Records Act's employment agreements do not qualify as part of a personnel file, and thus your executive sessions where you discuss the contract changes and the contract matter amendment were not matters that were legal to discuss in an executive session. Because you have not followed the law with either the contract for the additional $5,000 per year or the amendment to the city manager's contract, they are both void, and I urge you to begin again, but this time in accordance with the law in an open meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move to consent agenda. Consent agenda items can be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote. Consent agenda item 7A is a resolution approving the renewal of the IGA with Arapahoe County related to community service case management. Arapahoe County has requested the renewal of the IGA to provide community service case management for the City of Littleton, which will expire on March 13th, 2013. The agreement provides that the county will provide case management for offenders ordered by the Littleton Municipal Court to complete useful public service or community service hours. For the full year of 2009, the city paid $85,914 to community corrections. And in 2012, the city paid $150 for 3 indigent offenders that chose to use Arapahoe County rather than completing their community service on their own. There are no other costs associated with approving the IGA. 7B is a resolution. This is a resolution that would approve a resolution supporting a grant application to GOCO for playground improvements at Euclid Middle School, and I'm pulling that. 7C is an An ordinance? City Attorney?
I'm sorry, this is for 7C.
Yes.
It's an ordinance of the City of Littleton approving the rezoning of property known as 6775 and 6855 South Santa Fe Drive from RS Residential Suburban Agricultural District to I-1 Light Industrial District.
Jerry's pulled that. Okay, I need a motion on 7A, please.
Madam Chairman, I move we approve consent agenda item 7A.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve 7A. 7A is a resolution approving the renewal of the IGA with Arapahoe County. Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Okay. 7B, I pulled 7B because the GOCO grant, what they're looking for is $125,000 for the playground at Euclid. And the GOCO grant, what we would be doing is essentially supporting their application for the grant, which is easy and cost us nothing, and the grant would be for $100,000. So then the school comes up with an additional $25,000. I would amend this resolution to be that the City of Littleton will pay the additional $25,000 out of our Conservation Trust Fund.
Second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve an amendment. Oh, we don't have a, well, let's just do it this way. We have a motion and a second to approve the playground improvements at Euclid Middle School, GOCO grant request, and to contribute $25,000 to the cost of the project. Ready to vote?
One
discussion,
question.
I'm sorry. Bill? Jim?
Well, I don't philosophically have a problem with what your motion is. It just seems to me that if the community surrounding East had to do some fundraising of their own, they would have more buy-in to the protection of the playground equipment that's there because their parents help support it financially or help build it or whatever the need may be. When we step in and provide the match that's required, I think it removes that incentive. I don't have a problem if, after a period of time, they have done some very extensive, wholehearted attempts to raise the match and can't get there, that we supplement that money to get to that match figure.
Jerry, did you? Oh, Phil, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, just to be in support or to reinforce a little bit of what Jim mentioned, consider, at least provide a consideration that maybe we split it with LPS on this so that there is an interest where we can essentially, I don't have better information as to how much would be community to utilize this in addition to the school use, and absent something would look at a split.
Bruce?
I think the city's taken the position that, at one time we called them pocket parks, that small parks in residential areas where nothing previously existed provides a great amenity, and we can use open space type funds now under the GOCO guidelines for those kinds of things, and they're doing it throughout Colorado. The concern I have of asking the school to support out of their funds for the playground, really the goal is the playground's a neighborhood amenity. And so based on the kind of the commitment that we've made with the pocket parks around and the fact that GOCO is willing to support that as a recreational, appropriate use of the recreational, I like the idea of doing it this way because it is a neighborhood amenity in an area which could certainly use it.
Jerry?
Jim, I'm going to agree with you on that, I would like to see the schools all put forth. I think you let it out of the bag that we are willing to maybe step up and do it, Jim, so nobody out there tell anybody that we're willing to do that, because that ruins our negotiating position on that. So, Jim, I agree with you. I think it's a good neighborhood thing. So maybe they can delete that from the TV, too, so nobody knows that that's our negotiating position on this. Thank you.
Any other comments? Peggy?
I do have a question. I thought that the community raised some money a few years ago for this playground, or am I getting it confused with another one? Charlie, do you remember that? What, did the community contribute a few years ago to this particular playground?
For the playground at Euclid? No, we did, the city did contribute funds for the playground at East.
Okay.
But no, there have been no city there has not been any city involvement in improvements of the playground at Euclid Middle School.
What, did the community help with East? There was
Community paid for some. The city contributed, if I recall, $25,000 for that project.
Okay.
And that came out of, I think it was the Conservation Trust Fund at that point. But the community came together and did raise some money, and they also did a lot of the sweat equity to install the playground.
Okay, that's what I'm remembering. So, but no money from the community.
I'm not sure if I can
I just
answer
knew
that.
they were involved somehow, so.
Bruce?
It's not a council-determined position, but I attend on a lot of the LPS board meetings as, if you will, council liaison. I can tell you that parents have an extraordinary buy-in to their students and to the schools that their students attend, and if our ability to fund this particular item frees parents up to focus on a myriad of other items that the schools are all in dire need of, so much the better. So I'm absolutely in support of this.
Any other comments? I would just end with comment that I echo what Bruce has said in terms of, I think that asking the neighborhood to contribute or asking the parents to contribute, in the Littleton Public Schools, there is such a commitment and such a devotion to the schools and to the kids, and there is a continuous effort being made on all levels and support on all levels. And I think that the neighborhood definitely will benefit from this. The school will obviously benefit. I give them full kudos for going out to GOCO and looking for a $100,000 grant. And I think that a contribution of $25,000 from a conservation trust fund, which is paid through GOCO monies anyway, is the least that we can do to support this effort. All right, we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote? Jerry? You have to vote.
The vote is 5 in favor, with Councilmember Taylor and Councilmember Valdez voting no. The motion carries.
Okay, 7C. And Jerry, you pulled 7C.
Yes, I did. And I just wanted the process question was really all this was about for me.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I believe maybe at the last two council meetings, I had made a mistake in following our legislative rules on our last two quasi-judicial hearings that we had where in the legislative action, so an ordinance, for example, what the council's, well, let me back up. So the charter requires at second reading a public hearing. That's what is in our charter states. The legislative rules that the council had adopted has a additional public hearing for legislative action. And so an ordinance that the staff would be coming forward with. You heard a little bit about changing our planning code this evening. So if we were to amend the planning, what the council has said is we would like that to be posted and on first reading have a public hearing and then have a second reading as required by the charter on second reading. The quasi-judicial action, a rezone, a application for land use, is a quasi-judicial action of which the legislative rules as adopted by the council follows the charter, which is the first reading, which is then on consent, which is where the Breckenridge Brewery was this evening. I don't know exactly what it was titled, is essentially the public notification that there will be a hearing held on X day, in this case on March 19th, and that's all it is. And then the public hearing and the presentation by the staff and the council occurs at second reading, where the public hearing is. We, in our misuse of the public hearing at the first reading for the last two quasi-judicials, trained you wrong, and so we're now course correcting at this point. So tonight the action is to have a public hearing at second reading on March 2nd, and so that's why
March 19th.
I'm sorry, March 19th, which is why it was on consent this evening. And I can follow up with you separately, Councilman, if you'd like to see the legislative rules, and I can walk you through that.
You lost me after the first 5 minutes.
Hey, it was only 2 minutes, 37 seconds.
So this, if it stays and we approve it tonight, then it doesn't come back until March 19.
Correct, for the presentation and public hearing. So think about the first reading being the easiest way to describe it is probably you are putting the public on notice that this project is going to be coming.
So we don't talk about it for 5 hours, then come talk about it for 5 hours come March 19.
Correct.
I'm all for that, for not doing that.
Can I make up for the 4 hours, 47 minutes? And no.
Do you want to make a motion?
What you just said took you 30 seconds instead of the 5 minutes before. I think that's great. Thanks.
Do you want to make a motion?
Cool. Yes, I move to approve consensus. Where are we? I move that the ordinance approving the rezoning of property known as 6775 and 8755 South Santa Fe Drive from RS Residential Suburban Agricultural District to I-1 Light Industrial District be approved on first reading, and that a public hearing date be set for March 19, 2013. Just as a side note, that is also my 30th anniversary, but don't put that into the motion.
We need a second.
Second, and it's also St. Joseph's Day.
And do
We have a motion and a second discussion. Peggy.
Yes, I have two questions, so somebody will have to convey these to the city manager who just stepped out. For the next reading of this, I'd like to know how the word adjacent is defined when it talks about impact of events on adjacent residents. So that's one question. And then in terms of the pond, the quality of the pond, you know, the purifying of the pond with the runoff from the stuff that's coming out of the site, who will be responsible for the cost of enhancing the quality of the stormwater? And I don't need the answer tonight. I just would like to know that next time.
Who's responsible for stormwater enhancement?
Yeah, the cost of it.
The cost, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you.
Cool.
Any other discussion? Okay, ready to vote? A yes moves it to public hearing on the 19th.
It's quasi-judicial.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Okay. Item 8A. Item 8A is an ordinance. Kristen?
It's an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, approving the rezoning of property known as 2996 West County Line Road from B2 Community Business to PDR Planned Development Residential.
Okay, this is a public hearing, and this is also our second reading. So I would ask, similar to what we have done in the past on this, that the staff provide a report which includes answers and updates to any questions that the council had or that was brought up at the first reading, and that we don't go back and do a complete review of everything. And then, council, of course, if you have any questions about either the staff or the applicant, the public hearing, then if there's anyone who would like to come down and speak who wants to share additional or new information, you're more than welcome to. I do have a sign-up sheet. There's 2 people on that sheet. So I guess we'll go ahead. And Glenn, do you want to give us a Reader's Digest version?
I certainly will, Mayor and Council. A couple of things I wanted to hit were questions that came up at first reading. One had to do with access to the Highline Canal. And I did talk to folks at South Suburban. Actually, what would be required in order to them to directly access the trail would be basically a license with Denver Water, and that's not so much of an issue. However, it does appear that perhaps there's a little bit of CDOT right-of-way between their property and the Highline Trail, but I've talked it over with the developer. Their goal is to connect directly to that trail, which is in the southeast corner of their site, and they're going to work as hard as they can in order to do that. I think we did mention there is the bus line is, I think, Route 403 that runs basically from the Lincoln Avenue station to our light rail station at Mineral. And then there were some general questions about the amount of multifamily in the community, and staff provided you some statistics on that, as well as the applicant wasn't able to get down to the detail of geographic areas within Littleton as far as percent vacancy, but gave you some numbers on expected rents, and I think the vacancy rates for certain types of units, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom. So we provided that to you as well. One thing the applicant did do is they want to ensure that this project, whether it's them or somebody else, and it's the same goal of the staff, is a quality development and meets the intent of the plan development. And that's an opportunity for you to make sure that you are flexible with the requirements, but you get a quality project. So the applicant put together a number of changes to the plan development. One is a commitment to the amenities that they're showing on the site plan. And I just briefly put them here. That includes a clubhouse, a pool and spa facility, a dog park or a bark park, and then those open space areas that they described in the first review. They also took a look at the setbacks around the project and decided to keep them consistent with all the street frontage. So they moved the eastern setback from 10 feet, they doubled it to 20 feet. And then we clarified some of the language on the building setbacks from the drive aisles and the parking. So with that, staff is recommending approval. And again, on February 11th, your planning board also unanimously recommended approval. So we are recommending that the motion include that language that amends the ordinance, including Exhibit B, which is all those amendments to the plan development. So with that, Mayor, Council, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay. Council, any questions for staff? Bruce.
Glenn, did we have any idea when this would be completed, what the timeline would be?
I don't know, but that would be a good question for the developer.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Does the applicant want to say anything?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Mark Kerslake, the applicant for 2996 West County Line Road. Just to address Councilman Beckman's question, we would, if approved this evening, we would proceed immediately into the next process, which is the SDP, the Site Development Permit. I would hope we could get through that in the sort of 6 to 8 months sort of a range, and then hopefully break ground not long after, and it would probably be a roughly 18-month construction cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else you wanted to? You don't have to.
Get out of
but
here.
You can.
I don't feel compelled to speak, but there might be
Okay.
another question.
Peggy?
Yeah, so I did raise a question last time about whether or not you might actually have a larger space for bunches of people to get together rather than all the little pockets. And this wonderful symposium that I went to last week, one of the things that was emphasized by one of the speakers is the importance of what he called, and don't cringe when I say this, the collisions of people, where the synergy that occurs and the ideas that just kind of develop because you're interacting with people and talking about things and whatever. So having a larger space, as I suggested, for playing some activities right there as opposed to going to a park someplace down the road, and there isn't one immediately there, would be really nice. Now, I know you've got the whole site laid out, but this apparently is a fairly common thing to have larger space for so many units where people can, apart from the pool, interact. So if that's possible, I'd love that. I can't make you do that. And other ways that you might think of to get people engaged. But I also emphasized, I mean, not that I'm necessarily going to move there, but as green as you can make it in terms of energy efficiency would be absolutely super for long-term investments, and certainly the soundproofing being so close to the highway, all of that. I can't make you do that, but it would sure be appealing to me if I were moving.
Sure. Well, a couple of comments on that, and I guess in reverse order. On the green, there is a green point rating system, and we do plan to incorporate a number of those components, like the low flow fixtures, energy efficient appliances, high value insulation in the walls, and same with the window glazing systems, which are now much better these days. And we found at other communities we've developed that by doing things like that, it actually does help us attract residents. So it's a good thing. It lowers energy cost and consumption, but also helps attract people. So we do plan to do that. With respect to the amenity spaces and the collision of residents, we have a little bit different take on that. I think that we feel that you can have some larger facilities for concentrated activities, and I do think we have that on each end with the pool complex on the east, and then the area where it could be a volleyball or bocce ball type thing on our very, sorry, I said that backwards, on the clubhouse on the west, and then this bocce ball gathering area on the east. So we do have them at each end. And then we like the idea of several little clusters along the central spine road.
Those are fine. I just want to make sure we have adequate space for a lot of bumping into each other.
Right. No, we agree.
Thank you.
Thank you for your commitment to the amenities.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public hearing. And anybody, well, let me just hit the roster real quick first. Paul Bingham? Okay, thank you, Paul. And Phil Waltz, he just left. I think he may have signed up for not knowing what he was signing up for. But, okay, so those are the two. Does anybody who didn't sign up want to come down and speak? Okay. Please give us your name and address, and you have 4 minutes.
Good evening, council members. My name is Katie Raffensperger. I live at 5541 South Youngfield Street in Littleton. And as a current resident of Littleton, I would just like to speak in support of the Littleton Commons project. And I feel that there are 3 reasons that this project would be beneficial to Littleton. First is the support of current Littleton businesses. Second is the potential attraction of additional and new employers to Littleton. And third, the attraction of new residents to Littleton. And I believe that all 3 of these things will be major assets to our city. As a resident of Littleton, one of the things that I love most about the city is sort of the small town charm that it brings. And I think that consists of, or that is constituted by the many small local businesses that we have here. And I can imagine in today's sort of climate, it's hard to maintain a small local business, but I feel that this project will attract many new residents who will feel the same way I do about Littleton and really cherish and love those businesses. And I think that new residents attracted will provide an additional source of support for those small businesses and will go a long way towards maintaining the small town charm that Littleton has. Now, that being said, I am also not unrealistic about the need for new and additional jobs for local residents. And I think that the types of employers and jobs that the Littleton Commons project proposes to bring into Littleton will be an excellent source of jobs for Littleton residents, and it will also have the dual effect of increasing the tax base for the city. And I believe that these two things will additionally benefit the residents of Littleton. And finally, I think maybe the most important piece is the attraction of new residents to Littleton that the Commons project will provide. As part of a young married couple, I know that I would have really looked into living in a place like this. I think that it's attractive housing for young people. I've lived in Littleton since I was 10, and I left for college, and I recently moved back. And one of the main reasons I chose to purchase a home instead of renting was because there's sort of a lack of quality rental housing for younger couples in Littleton. And I think that this provides a very nice option for young couples who are looking to either move back to Littleton because they grew up here, or who are looking to eventually put down roots in Littleton but can't currently afford the payments on a home. So I think this is a very an excellent option for those young couples. And for those reasons, I support the Littleton Commons project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, and I need a motion.
I move to approve the ordinance rezoning the property known as 2996 West County Line Road from B2 Community Business to PDR Plan Development Residential and a Littleton Commons Plan Development Plan with the conditions that the modifications described in the attached Exhibit B are incorporated into the PD plan prior to recordation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready to vote? No. Bruce?
Two things. Having listened to the presentations and the community feedback and reading the material we've been provided, I certainly find that the project does meet the intent of the code sections, in this case 10-2-23A and B, related to the Planned Development District in terms of improving public safety, health, and welfare by allowing more flexible development, by encouraging more creative and effective land use, encouraging innovation and efficiency of residential development to meet growing demands of all housing types, and encouraging innovative development and redevelopment of land uses to meet contemporary needs. So I'll obviously support this, but I would also offer encouragement to the developer that with respect to the west parcel, would very much like to see that developed in accordance with this, certainly within your guys' time frames and as the economics dictate. But I guess the encouragement would be that if it can continue to be viewed as a commercial piece of property as opposed to residential at some point in the future, that would be, at least in my opinion, a very desirable outcome for that parcel as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Peggy?
Yeah, I would say that I am a bit anxious about the overbuilding of apartments in the greater metro area, but I don't think it's it's my prerogative to stop you from doing that. That's not one of the guidelines that we've got to decide on. So that's one reason why I hope the devil you make these things as appealing as possible for long-term, really long-term, attractive development, because that's in your interest, particularly if you want to build, as we hope you will, on the commercial lot that you want to build on. Thank you.
Bill?
And I recognize the handcuffs around building defects and actually being able to build to own in the current environment, and applaud any opportunity that you have to map for some alternative later down as that gets resolved.
Anybody else? Ready to vote? Go build it.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Go build. Okay, we are on to 8B.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes.
Welcome to Littleton.
Thank you.
And well done.
Great presentation. Last time. Okay, this is an ordinance on second reading and a public hearing. Kristen?
This is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, imposing a moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications, and the licensing, permitting, establishment, or operation of any recreational marijuana establishments or marijuana clubs in Littleton pursuant to the newly enacted Section 16 of Article 18 of the Colorado Constitution, Amendment 64.
Okay. This is like I said, this is our second reading and a public hearing. Kristen, do you want to give a little bit of background? You've included in our packet some good information, and I think if you could talk a little bit about the dates. There would seem to be some confusion on that. Give us a little clarity there, and then a bit on.
Yes, give me just a minute. So the dates, the timelines that are coming down. I did see that the task force did conclude its meetings, and the recommendations of the task force are now being edited and assembled into a final report. And those, they said, would be available and delivered to the governor and the General Assembly the week of March 11th. And then the legislature will take it up in the legislative session. By July 1, 2013, the department shall adopt the necessary regulations. And by October 1, 2013, the department shall begin accepting and processing license applications. So that was why we were looking at that October 1 date.
Okay. So, Council, any questions? Jim?
Kristen, because the task force recommendations go to the state legislature, and we're assuming that they're going to enact laws, is that why the July 1st deadline is set as it is, that they've got to wait till the legislature acts before they can really develop the laws, the rules that we'll have to abide by?
That's correct. So we did, I did see in the Denver, I didn't attend any of the task force meetings, and I don't believe anyone from the city did, but I did see reported in the Denver Post some of the things that are going to come out in those recommendations, which include an excise tax of 15% paid by marijuana stores at the wholesale level, a special marijuana sales tax paid by consumers, restrictions on where the marijuana stores can advertise, that will include marijuana and the smoking ban at bars and restaurants, which the Post is saying would effectively bar the marijuana clubs, requiring the marijuana to be grown at home in a room with walls and a ceiling, things like that.
As this flows to the legislature, I'm concerned about the state stepping in to doing a specialized sales tax on the production of this, because I think that should be reserved to the cities. Mm-hmm. And I expressed before that I think we need to provide a pretty huge tax upon what happens in the city. So if the legislature starts putting that in part of their bills, I would like the city to take a stand in saying, no, we want to preserve that right for sales tax to the cities and not to the state. The state has the right to do the excise tax. That's in the amendment. But I think the sales tax is optional.
If I may, Mayor, real quick, and I mean, you know, Council Member, I would imagine that the Colorado Municipal League will take up that as a local control issue and acknowledge that the excise tax could pay for the necessary costs associated with state management of recreational marijuana, but that as you just stated, the local jurisdictions should be able to tax as their communities so deem appropriate, and that it is not of statewide concern on the sales tax component. So I would, and you'll, as executive board member most likely be making that decision, but I think that I would expect that CMO will come out opposed to that, and we certainly can support that and participate in those conversations.
Bruce?
Phil, did you have one on that point?
Yes.
I've got a different point. But.
Well, I have one on that point, and I'll get that one in, and I'll wait.
Okay, just go ahead.
Real quick.
Do all yours now.
Isn't there a state, effectively, excise tax on liquor and fuel? So there is a precedent for an excise tax at some state level. So, Jim, just to clarify, you're talking about something that's determined
I'm
to be
talking about sales tax,
sales
not
tax.
excise.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
In this moratorium, it is not precluding the personal carry or the use at home on any interim basis. And it's also, I'm making these statements, and if I get them wrong, please help me, Kristen. And then the second piece is with regard the October 1 date, that's an outside date that we're establishing in the moratorium. And if there's tremendous clarity coming out of the state and an opportunity for us to jumpstart something prior to October 1 that's thoughtful for the city in all the areas that we want to make sure there's safety as well as preserving the rights that are in part of Amendment 64, we can act sooner than October 1, correct?
Absolutely, and I think we've received that message loud and clear that we will be working quickly to bring those forward to you as soon as we have a handle on it.
You giving odds on tremendous clarity coming from the state? My question had more to do with Councilmember Taylor's thoughts with respect to sales tax. One thing, I think we absolutely, if we have the opportunity to get on the sales tax road, yes, but I guess I would respectfully ask staff at this juncture between now and October 1 or earlier to go take a look at any information, academic studies, whatever you can find regarding potential, what's referred to as elasticity of demand for this stuff. So in other words, is it going to be elastic or inelastic? If we tax it, are people going to keep buying it at a real, at a high level, or which would be inelastic, or if it's elastic and we start taxing the stuffings out of it, they're going to go someplace else. Now if everybody's got the same tax rate, if all the municipalities have regionally figure out how to get the same tax rate on this stuff, that might be the right answer. Maybe that's a Metro Mayor's issue or something that we need to be looking at to promote. But I guess I'm curious to see if you guys can find anything that's out there that sort of suggests people are going to buy it regardless of what the tax rate is. So if we put 30% on it, great, but maybe we make more money if we only pick a number, 10% on it.
Well, I'm almost out of my first ounce, so I need to go buy another ounce.
Where'd you get it?
Did
you get it in town?
Well, of course, I shop local.
You have glaucoma, huh?
Yeah, and I think, you hit on part of this is a long conversation in terms of ballot measures. I think it's a conversation at the Metro Mayor's Caucus around how the Front Range handles this, to your question. And obviously it's a local control issue, to Councilman Taylor's question. And to the extent that at the end of the day, all of these requires votes of the people in the individual jurisdictions, it'll be those jurisdictions and that populace of that jurisdiction making that determination. But we will be doing a lot of work should the council and the state, should the state allow the local jurisdictions to have that conversation, and the council is interested, we will do it. In fact, one of the things, I can't remember when Lori Weigel is coming, but she's coming before too long to talk about ballot measures, and this is one of the ones that I believe Councilman Taylor actually already gave me to put on the list. So part of that conversation will be polling the citizens to see what is their willingness to tax or interest in taxing.
And I would just remind council that we are dealing with this tonight in terms of it as a moratorium in order to give staff more time to deal with the issues that we're starting to bring up. So can we focus it back on the moratorium issue? Bruce.
That was one of my comments. Just to the moratorium issue, again, this isn't the long-term policy. This isn't the long-term anything. This is to give everybody a chance to understand what's coming down the pike from the state. I don't think it's going to be clear. There's going to be devil in the details. And the city's been more than willing, as they did with the medical marijuana, to find ways to accommodate the voters' intent in a way that is appropriate for the community, and that's every bit of what we're going to do here. But for the meantime, until everything settles, we've got to just send the word out. We're not ready to deal with licensing yet. We're not ready to deal with applications yet. And staff needs to hear that from council so that folks know that we're not lining up yet to do this. It's still in the formulating stage.
Okay. Any other?
I'm not going to rehash from the last meeting why I'm opposed to this. I would rather see us move the date up to July 1st instead of October, because it does say in our report that unless we extend it beyond October 1st. So I would much rather see it go to July 1st, and let's just be aggressive about it instead of kicking back to what everybody else is going to do. I think in this age of crisis management that we get out of D.C., we're doing the same thing here. But I think, again, because this is marijuana, everybody's worried about it. Tonight we talked barely about Breckenridge without any issues, but yet alcohol is a major problem throughout the city, the state, everywhere. But we didn't give that any consideration. On this one, where I see it as less of a problem at the properties I manage, I think we're treating it far more strict than we do alcohol. But I'm not going to go back to all my comments I made last time.
Okay, we are in questions of staff right now because this is a public hearing. Do we have questions?
Comment on something that's stated in our communication.
You're welcome to ask questions of staff.
Just for clarification, we cannot, as I understand it, extend this past October 1 unless we opt out. I mean, we can't, we have to, that's what I understood the CML communication that we got today to say, that we have to have something in place by October 1.
Right, my recommendation would be that by October 1, we have either a regulatory scheme in place or an outright prohibition in place.
Right, but I'm saying I thought legally we're required to do one of those two, that we cannot extend past October 1. But maybe I'm wrong, so we could check that out.
I think, Peggy, October 1 is when the state can begin accepting and processing license applications for marijuana establishments. So if your city doesn't have a process in place, then you fall under essentially what the state process is. So it gives us.
I just looked at the CML communication we got today, and
we'll get clarification on that next time. Then, thank you. Yeah. Jim, did you have a question?
Well, I want to make some comments after the public hearing.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. I don't have a roster. Would anybody like to come down and speak on this issue?
Come on, Paul.
Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, and I need a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move that the ordinance imposing a moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications and the licensing, permitting, establishment, or operation of any recreational marijuana establishments and marijuana clubs be approved on second reading.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Discussion? Jim.
Well, two things. In response to Jerry's comments a while ago about the July 1 date, philosophically, I can agree with that. The problem is when medical marijuana came along, we got ahead of the game because we established our rules prior to the state issuing theirs. We had to go back and redo all of our rules, not all of them, but a lot of our rules because we were ahead of the game. So if the state doesn't do their rules to July 1, I think we've got to give some time in there for our staff to come up with what the rules would be presented to us to adopt. So it needs to be a date after July 1 for the city. I don't disagree that it needs to be before October 1, but that's the reason why I think it can't be July 1. The second thing
Let me respond to your one point, if I may. That I think July 1, the city can definitely bring us a draft. Doesn't mean we have to approve it and put it in place, but they could at least be that far along to give us a plan.
Provided the state has released what they're going to be talking about.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have a second item.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I interrupted.
When we did this on first reading, I made the comment that I would vote for it simply because of the club issue. It's my personal belief that we can't stop a social club from being formed in the city. But what I would like to have happen sooner rather than later is that staff comes back with what the regulations would be for a club to operate in the city, whether they are going to be allowed to have a liquor license, whether you can't have the atmosphere or the air around the establishment polluted with the smells of the product. Some things like that they can come in, that the building code can address as specifics what they've got to have. And this can be done sooner rather than later. So we have that already in place. But as far as the moratorium, I don't really see the need for it, except for getting the rules and regulations that we need to have before we have a club open up in one of our vacant mall spaces.
Does anybody else have any?
Mayor.
Michael?
Two quick comments. One, and I think Kristen read this, but the recommendations from the task force effectively would prohibit at the state level the smoking clubs. So we certainly can start to put together what, if that ends up not being part of the legislation, what those conditions would be and situations would be, regulations as you just described. But assuming that that is one of the recommendations that's carried, we're not going to need local regulation because it'll be outlawed. And to Councilman Valdez's, you have our assurance that the moment the state moves on this, we will move quickly, and if we start to see a direction that's going, we can start drafting this. So it will not be closer to October. I know you can vote however you want this evening, but I just want council to be assured that we're not going to wait.
Quickly don't necessarily go together.
Yeah. So contrary to my earlier joke,
marijuana and munching.
We're not the users of the marijuana, so we can move quickly and be nimble and agile. And we'll do so at your request. And direct and short.
I know what the task force said in the recommendations to the legislature, but the legislature is a political body, and they are swayed in different manners than the task force is.
Really?
So I'm not for sure that social clubs prohibition is going to stay in any state legislation. That's my point.
Yes, I hear you.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second to impose a moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, approval of application.
Wait.
Jim?
Could I make one slight amendment to this ordinance?
You can make it.
On page 2 of the ordinance itself, in the first whereas, in line number 3, it says, whereas it is the desire of the city council and city staff to study the effects of such marijuana establishments and marijuana clubs, considering the city's existing land use regulations and master plan, and therefore provide information to the city council. I'd like to put a period there and strike the rest of that sentence, because the rest of that sentence assumes that it gives an assumption that I don't think we ought to be presenting.
Wait a second.
Okay, we have an amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Where are you putting the period?
After city council in line 3, and then striking the rest of the 3.
It would read, whereas it is the desire of the city council that city staff study the effects of such marijuana establishments and marijuana clubs, considering the city's existing land use regulations and master plan, and thereafter provide information to the city council. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Are you ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor with Mayor Brinkman voting no. The motion carries.
Yeah, whoever I am tonight. Okay, we have our original motion,
Modified.
which has been modified, thank you, which has been modified by the amendment imposing a moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications in the licensing, permitting, establishment, or operation of marijuana establishments and marijuana clubs. Ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor with Councilmember Valdez voting no. The motion carries.
Okay. What? Yeah, whatever, you guys. Okay. General business. Phil.
Yes, Madam Chairman. As a follow-on to last evening's discussion, which actually was a follow-on to an earlier discussion, which has been a long-term study of possibilities of collaboration with Englewood Fire Department and Littleton Fire and Rescue. I would like to make a motion to provide some direction to City Manager. And I move to direct the City Manager to develop a minimum of 8 fire and rescue initiatives from the final ESCI study and their strategic initiatives suggested, with consideration being given to collaborative efficiency and effectiveness, as well as longer-term cost avoidance, and incorporate these into the 2014 policy questions for council consideration, also known as our 2014 budget process.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do you have discussion?
Just briefly, we had a lot of discussion last night. What this does is provides a cover for the city manager to be working with the chief as well as the city manager and chief in Englewood to develop some solid elements that go farther than where we may currently have collaboration with the city of Englewood. It doesn't yet commit us to any kind of fire authority or next steps, but it is designed to actually get us to some point of greater degree of collaboration. And there's some opportunities that were mentioned, possibility of dispatch across a larger geography, certainly some collaboration on what do we do with training, and whether there's some opportunities around that, as well as some other sharing of various different expertises. Those were all mentioned as examples right now, but what this does is it puts us on record of saying, hey, let's take that next step and really look for the opportunities. And I'm sure the city manager who collaborated on the wording for this feels he's got in his pocket at least 8 initiatives that we could probably take on.
Bruce.
There were 42 strategic initiatives suggested in the study. They covered many of the operational areas, including training, dispatch, EMS, hazmat, all the different things you can imagine in the fire operations. I think it's a good idea probably to look at those. I would ask that we don't expect this to be the without any equal type study. This is to address the questions and the feasibilities and perhaps even raise additional questions, because I'm not sure that all of them are ones that we would end up wanting to adopt, and the staff time is incredible on doing some of those. I know in my experience, I've done a couple of those in the past, and they've been tremendous studies, and we end up looking at 6 or 8 other adjacent jurisdictions, et cetera, and it becomes of its life of its own. So I just want to throw that caution out. Good idea, but let's not expect it to be the thing without equal.
Any other, Jerry?
Yes. I'm just going to go back to my comments I made last night about that study, and it was a good study, and it surely didn't give me a warm, as I said last night, a warm fuzzy about saving money or efficiencies, improving efficiencies, or improving service to Trailmark. I do think that we need to continue to do something, whether it involves Englewood or not. But I think you're right, Bruce. I think that to give the city another huge report to do on their own is a tough one to do at this point. But again, as far as the study, that I don't see why we should have the agreement as that study was suggesting. But I think our fire and emergency folks and the city staff can come up with some good stuff.
Jim?
I have two questions concerning the motion. Number one, was the number 8 just plucked out of the air as a thing? How did you come up with 8? And number two, that was a very long motion, but I didn't recall anything about a timeline for getting this accomplished. And from my standpoint, sooner is better than later.
Bill?
8 was approximately 20%, or 1 out of 5 of the list of 42, and certainly fit within, if we do decide to go forward within the allowable or suggested limit level that they said to find some low-hanging fruit, develop a trust relationship, and move forward on that basis. The city manager didn't blink at that number either on that front, and the time frame is in our 2014 budget considerations.
I can't see if he's blinking or not. Okay.
Peggy?
It's like Rem over there.
Peggy?
I'd like to amend the motion.
Okay, we have an amendment.
Yes, so I would like to amend to put in the words at least 8, because if there are lots more low-hanging fruit, so at least 8.
The motion said a minimum of 8.
Sorry, so all that talking, I lost minimum. Sorry.
Okay.
All that talking.
So I have a question. Are you including Englewood in any collaboration with this?
I'm presuming that the city manager has a working relationship with the city manager in Englewood to develop this, and he wouldn't have allowed it to gone this far if he didn't have a pretty good idea. Quite honestly, I think they should probably have some greater urgency on developing something along this line. Do you want to comment?
And actually my comment was going to be along the question of the mayor, is that I do think that there are some items that are at the staff level within those 42 that we can put forward, but obviously the condition will require, or the motion will require at the end of the day, Englewood's participation. But I'm confident that the intent of the motion and giving us some strong direction will result in some policy questions for the council associated with the 2014 budget. Some of those may be things that will be contingent on our neighbors to the north adopting similar expenditures or agreements or something like that, because this is a collaboration. And I think to both Councilmember Valdez and Beckman's comments, we are continuing to look at the greater regional aspect. This question about that came up last night around dispatch, CAD systems. Those issues are out there almost on steroids as you start to look at law enforcement and how all this works together. So we're constantly looking at this, but I am comfortable with the motion because at the end of the day, it'll be the council decision as associated with the 2014 budget.
Bruce.
Yeah, and you touched on dispatch, but I mean, the example from last night was if both cities have dispatch capabilities and both cities have to change out equipment over the next few years to upgrade based on technology standards or so forth and so on, it makes sense to collaborate, combine dispatch operations. So that's not going to be an overt cost savings from an expense perspective, but it certainly is going to save both organizations a lot of cash outflow in the future from not having to do stuff that we'd be duplicating if we did it, if we each did it ourselves. So I mean, I think these are the kind of things that to me or they identified last night as being, major upsides that we should be trying to capture.
And the Englewood manager and I were actually probably, along with the chiefs, were probably about 2/3 away down the road on joint dispatch and even other partnerships in that when the study was decided to be done. So we pressed all that, pressed pause on that. But those conversations are ongoing or had been ongoing and will now pick up and gain momentum.
Jim.
Michael, I assume you will read into the motion that was made to bring along our fire partners, Highlands Ranch Metro District and Littleton Fire Protection District, in these conversations?
Absolutely. I've made the commitment to our fighter partners, as I have to you, that decisions that are made at this level will only move forward with their agreement. And that's why they were at the table last night. That's part of that partnership. We are no longer, not that we were, but we're not treating them as a contract. We're truly treating them as our partner. So, and both Terry and Cindy, respectively, have my assurance on that. So yes, to answer your question.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jerry, that was long-winded.
Any other discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Yep, we are adjourned.
Can I have, please, I promise to be quick.
All right.
Two quick things. One, we are ordering new speakers for this room, which I think some of those in the room will be excited about.
You don't mean us, do you?
So
Yeah, okay. I don't have a time frame for you, but I just want to let you know that we are in the process of ordering, updating our 1972 models. And then second, Councilmember Cole had asked me about the sequestration at the federal level and whether I thought there was any concerns at the local level. And my answer was unequivocally no. I think, and I won't get into politics, but I think some of what you're seeing in the newspaper is the equivalency of me coming forward and saying we're going to close the library on a Saturday afternoon. Some of the stuff that's in front is issues to make the citizens get riled up in here. The federal government, I have full faith in their ability to cut 2% appropriately. And the grants and funding that we have are...
They're not cutting, they're reducing the growth.
I'm sorry.
They are increasing it by 7%.
Okay. That is my point. Thank you. We don't have anything to worry about at the local level on this. Our grants are already in place. Funding for the issues that are already coming forward, those dollars have been appropriated. The state may have some different issues, but we will not have any degradation of level of service.
Back to our speakers. Are you also going to do microphones?
We can certainly look into that. That was not part of it.
It would be nice if you had your own microphone and
You
another
think?
microphone over here.
I don't know. I like leaning one way or the other depending upon who's I'm cutting off here.
We can tell which way he's
Thanks.
leaning.
We'll look into that.
Can I adjourn now?
Is it official? No, really. That didn't take that long.